The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started with our training. We're going to do the financials one today, and what we'll start with is going to be kind of some basic setup and some just basic functionality of SAP. So if you have anybody that's going to do any of the other trainings, you may want them to just start with maybe the first 5 or 10 minutes of this training, just so that they understand some of the functionality of it. And the basics. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to go through some of the business partners, setup, how to enter a business partner. We'll talk about the posting periods, how those are set up, taxes, part of the banking setup. We'll discuss the chart of accounts and the GL determinations, and that's kind of the big one. There's a lot of information that's involved with this, and this is where we need to start. So each one of these trainings is going to build on the next one. Hopefully by the time you get to the financials 2 training, there'll be enough transactions from everybody doing all the other trainings that we can actually run payment runs and different things like that and be able to see some of the financials and see what they look like. So that's what we're going to work through today. First thing is we want to look at the add-on, just so you know where it's at. In the administration menu on the add-ons, add-on manager, here's where the Veridian add-on is, and you can see if it's connected. If it's not connected, you can come in and start it from here. So I just click on here and start. If there was something it didn't quite load correctly, you can always stop it and restart it from here, but that's where you'll find the add-on. As far as some of just the basics, we have a couple things in here that are important. In the file, there's a preview layout, and so if you have different layouts that you have, so if you have a sales order and you want to look at the different layouts that are available, you can do a preview layout and you can choose which layout you want to look at. I use that quite a bit, just so I can see what the different ones are looking like. In the view, there's a couple things that you're going to want, especially if you're working with a Veridian add-on. You'll want to have the user-defined fields initialized so that you can see there's a lot of user-defined fields throughout the add-on, and it requires setup things so you just want to make sure that you check the user-defined fields on everything. System information, if you have this initialized, you can see which table that these are setting at, which is helpful if you're going to be doing any type of queries. So if you look at this second line here, as I go over these at the bottom, at the right side of that second line, you can see it says OCRD, comma, card code. The OCRD is the table name, and the card code is the field name. So as you go to different fields, you can see what that field name is. That will be very helpful if you're doing any DTW templates and filling in some DTW information, as well as doing any queries. And just as an example, these are the user-defined fields that are on the business partner. So those are some very helpful things. The other thing that's really helpful is the fit column width. Excuse me. So if you have anything that has like a grid of some sort and the information's kind of getting covered, you can use the fit column width and it will automatically move these widths. So if I come in here and I do that, it's going to adjust these to fit all the information. So that is a lot easier. It's kind of tricky to get it in the right spot in order to manually move these. So that is a very helpful one. This modules menu, this is everything that's the same as this. However, if you have changed your settings, you can come in and change the form settings on this main menu, and you can add and subtract different functions. So a lot of times people will come in and they'll take off these on their main menu and they're like, oh, I don't have access to it. And they can still have access if they come through here. You just may have it hidden somewhere. So the modules, sometimes if you hide things that you're not using a whole lot, you can still use the modules and get to where you want to go. On your tools menu, you can get to that same form settings as right here. There's a change log. So a lot of documents, you'll be able to see the change log. So if you're wondering, a good example is like a bill of material. If a bill of material gets changed and you want to know why it was changed and what was changed to it, you can look at the change log and see exactly who has made that change. You'll be able to see who's added invoices and sales orders and all kinds of things. So change log is really helpful. And then here's those queries that if you know the SQL, you can come in and do the query generator, and I can tab in here. And here's all of my table names. So we saw that the business partner was the OCRD, and there's my OCRD business partner. And here's all the fields in that. So you can, if you know SQL, you can come in and write these. It's pretty easy to kind of just do a select. You can just double click what you want in here. The information you want to see, you can hit execute and it will show you that information. You can do wheres and group bys and all kinds of things. You can do multiple tables and have them linked. So there's a lot of things that you can do in here to get information out. With Veridian, it's really important that you know where these user-defined windows are, which is all the user-defined tables that get added into SAP when we install the add-on. So there's a lot of information in here that you'll go in and check. For template items, it's the auto item table, and we'll talk about that in the inventory training in depth, but there's that one. There's some different setting ones. So here's a Nav Cell setting, which is some settings that we have, and we'll turn things off and on and allow you to do different processes. And then there's the Nav Cell user settings. Those are probably the two that you're going to look at the most. There's other things like you can see the plant journal, which will show you everything that's happened to the plant. You can look at the water log, every time you've watered. Those types of things are in there. But let's look at this user options. And there's a couple things in here. So this one's probably one of the big ones, the max lot size for bud and for trim. So when you are, if your state requires certain lot sizes that you can then send for test. So if your state only says that there's 500 grams, then you'd put 500 grams in here for bud. And then that, when you did the QA wizard and had it down to a size that you could then take a sample of, your system would only let you have that. You could leave this blank and it will be unlimited. But the first value is going to be the quantity. The second value is going to be the unit of measure. So if it was a 10-pound bag, you could put 10 in here and then an LB in here for pounds. So that's one of those things. The route timer. This is how long your inventory has to wait before it can actually be shipped out. So adjust that as needed, depending on your state. The quarantine timer, same thing. You'll do this depending on the state. So how long do you have to keep that quarantine item before you can actually send it to destruction? We have a couple new settings. If you're going to do wet processing, we would have this turned on to yes. And this crop cycle management is in QA right now, which is going to allow you to see all of your costs as they go through the crop cycle. So you'll be able to assign any labor cost, any additives that you've added, anything that's going into that specific crop. You'll be able to to track those costs. So by the time that you go and harvest, you'll know exactly how much that crop has cost you. So this one in particular is in testing right now. All right, as far as the other table that you might want to know is the Nav Cell Settings. So these are some of the settings that are in here and available. We've got a couple new things. There's the wet process again, but for serializing plants, we have a setting. If you're like a hemp farm, you would have this set to no. Any cannabis farms are going to have it set to yes, but you can change where it gets serialized on this serialized stage. So if it's serialized as soon as it becomes a plant, it's set to veg. If it's serialized at the flower stage, it's going to be set to flower, which is FLO, is what it'll be set up in here. So that's where some of that settings are to make some of those changes. But there's a lot of different settings in here that will help kind of go through the process. All right, so those are mainly the tools. The only other thing that's really important is this system message log. So a lot of times you'll do something and you'll see a red error flashback down here, and it doesn't stay there long enough for you to read it. If you open up the system's message log, it's going to tell you what that error is instead of having to keep trying the error and trying to catch it before it disappears. So that's an important one. As far as your toolbar, you can send things to Excel. Big one, this is the find, and this is the add. So when you're in documents, and depending on what type of a document is that you're opening, it will automatically open in either find or add. So if you're doing sales order, it's going to come in on add mode because that's usually what you're going to do. For business partner, it's going to come in as a find mode, and it'll just tell you right here. Any of those yellow fields are searchable. So you can type anything in here and find that. But if I wanted to switch, I wanted to add a business partner, I would just switch it over here. And I can do my customer or my vendor. So that's a big one. The other one is these arrows. So these will take you back and forth through your different business partners, sales orders, invoices, all that information. I can go all the way to the end one, and I can go all the way to the beginning one. So those are important. The other one is your refresh button. So if you've made a change, and instead of going to the next record and back to refresh it, you can just hit refresh, and it will show up that change. Another thing that's used in this form settings, we showed you the menu. If I'm on a sales order or anything with a grid that you want to change or see if there's a field that you want to use, you just go into your form settings and in the table, and here's all the fields I can include on there. And you can check them, uncheck them, whatever works. You can move them around if you want. And to do that, you just click on it and hold it until you see that box around it, and then you can move it. If you just try and grab it and move it, it doesn't do anything. You have to click and hold until you see the box, and then you're able to move them around. So those are helpful. And then the only other one I want to just touch base on is this layout designer. And that is so you can see if there's if you need to make adjustments to like how your sales order looks, or here we could do the pick ticket, and we can set different ones as default in here. And just some of the options, you can set them as for all users, you can set them as a current user, or you can set defaults to specific users. The other thing you could do is you can do them based on a business partner. I've seen people use that for if they have like a state like entity that they have to have their invoice has to look different. Sometimes they'll assign a specific invoice layout to a particular business partner, and then every time that you print an invoice for that, it would be in that specific format. From here, I can also go in and do manage layouts, which is going to take me to my reports, and I can do some edits and different things there. So those are the main kind of functionality here that I use a lot. And those will help you, and you'll see as we go through this. So let's look at some of our setup information. Looks like, so we're going to start with our business partners. So in your administration, in your setup, these are all some specific setups for each of the modules that are down below. So if I look at my business partners, we've got the different countries. If you are having addresses for a different country and you are using the DTW templates to import those in, you want to just make sure you're using the same code that's here on your DTW templates. There's different address formats that you can look at, and they're based kind of on the country. So here is the US one. The way that it's set up is you've got your street, block, city, state, and zip, and then the country. So you can make changes to this. If I didn't want the country, I could right-click and delete the row. With the block, that's kind of like your address line 2. If you don't have anything in that address, it's going to show kind of as a blank line there. So let me show you what that looks like. So you can see here's my address, and I've got this blank row in here because I don't have anything in the street number 2. So that's if you're not going to use that street, the line 2, you can always just delete it off that layout as far as the address formats. Completely up to you, but just so you understand why there is a blank line there, it's a placeholder for that second address line. So we've got customer groups and we've got vendor groups. And these are the ones, these first 4 are the ones that are imported with the add-on as soon as it's added on there. You can change these however it makes sense to you. These are just some examples. Different things why you would have different groups. First one is reporting. So you may want to run a report and see what your wholesalers are doing or what the retailers are doing. On the vendor side, you may want to run a report on your labs, see what's going on to those. So that's one reason. Another reason is to automatically assign price lists. So when you create a new business partner and you mark them as a patient, they're automatically going to get the sales price list, and you can assign the different price lists. The other thing that it's been used for, and this is probably a big one if you're doing retail, is for tax determinations. So if they are a patient, they would get like the exempt tax. So things like that. So there's a couple different reasons why you would have different ones. But this is how you can add them, you can edit them, you can delete them, just right click and remove. That's where you're going to go to do those. Then we've got our properties. These are just a checkbox on the business partner. So let's go ahead and open up one of our business partners. And I'll show you the difference here. So let's look at a customer. And all of our customers will start with a C, and our vendors start with a V. And in this database, it is set up to a point of sale. Those are going to come over with this VP number, just so you know the difference between these. Then I can look at my properties and see, like this MJ Medicinals, they are a retail multi-location and a grower. So I could run a report and find all of my retail multi-locations, and it would just find all of the ones that had this check mark. So those are some of the reasons why you might want to do that. Okay. Dunning terms, these are For collections, we haven't really seen that much in the cannabis industry so far, but at some point you may need to do collections if you're, maybe a distributor and you're sending and they've got net 30 and you're trying to do that. This dunning wizard will kind of do that. You can set fees you can have different letters, so letter 1, letter 2, letter 3. You can charge interest on them, all the things. So these are just collections, information that you can get set up. Payment terms. These are the different types of payment terms. And if you put an asterisk in your finds, it's going to pull up a list of what you're looking for. So here are the payment terms in this database. They're very easy to add additional ones, make adjustments to. If I look at like this 210 net 30, you can see it's due in 30 days, but I've got a cash discount. And if I look at my cash discount, let's open that one up. The golden arrows will always open up another screen. They'll drill down into it. So here's my cash discount. So in 10 days, if they pay in 10 days, they'll get a 2% discount, and it's based on the document date. So you could change that to posting date or system date, but we have it set to document date. And then the one here is set to document date as well. So it's going to look at the document date, and it's going to do these calculations. So that's the majority of the setup for business partners. And let's just take a look at one of our business partners here. So if you're going to go in and add, I'll just show you some of the differences that are going to happen. You can do a customer, a vendor, or a lead. If you do a lead, it's still going to use that C in the prefix of the number. And you can keep them as a lead up until you do a delivery. And then you'll have to switch that lead over to a customer before you can do a delivery. But we've got the customer. If I change it to a vendor, it's going to change it to the V numbering series. So this is where you'll choose that group. You can store their federal tax ID. Let's look at a vendor. So let's look at this one. I will show you some different things about the vendor. They're pretty much the same between customer and vendor. There's a few little things that you may need to know about for the vendor, but basic information in here. You can mark them active and inactive here. Your contact people, these would be contacts at there. So if you had a contact for accounts payable and you had a contact for the purchasing agent, those types of things, you could keep all the contacts in here. The name is going to be the name of the person. Most people don't use this split out, but you can split them out and just have it in those different fields. You can include titles, positions, specific phone numbers for them, email addresses and stuff, so you can find them. And then you can define one as a default. If you define one of your contacts as a default, and you'll just highlight it and set it to default, they will show up as the contact person on this first page. So whatever default contact, it will pull over. Addresses, ship to, bill to, those types of addresses are going to be in here. Pretty basic. Again, you'll want to name it. Most people just do pay to and ship to as the name. And then you'll have that will flow through. And we'll go through some of this when we do some of the payables and the receivables information. Payment terms, we've got our payment terms in here. You can adjust them. These are going to be a default payment term. So if I went and did a invoice or a goods receipt PO or anything like that, it's going to automatically put net 30 on that invoice. But on the specific invoice, you may have different payment terms on different invoices that you've made it. You can change it on those specific invoices, but default will always come from what's in here. Here's the price list that's been assigned to them. This is the default. And again, on the specific documents, you can change those. The payment runs, if you're doing, and we'll talk about this as in the bank setup, but if you're going to want them to be included on a check run, you want to make sure that they have a payment method assigned to them. Otherwise, you won't be able to do the payment run. And we'll talk about it in the financials too. We'll go over how to do a check run. But this is just some of the setup to be ready for that. So this is where the vendor is a little bit different. If you have 1099 custom vendors that you want to put, you'll want to come in and check these. So you'll assign them whatever form they are in whatever box they are. So if they are a 1099, it's much easier to make sure you get this done on the business partner before you put a document in for them. If you do put the document in and then come in and do the 1099 information, it won't be on that document because it's created before this was added. And you'll have to do a 1099 adjustment to get it to add in correctly. So tax information, if they are exempt, for customers, it's going to pop up a box and you'll put in their tax exempt number. If there's a vendor and a customer that are the same, and this is going to happen when you're talking about your labs, because to send out their vendor, as far as you're going to receive an invoice from them, but they are a customer so that you can do the delivery and ship that sample out to the lab. So they're going to be both. And in that case, you'll have a connecting customer. You'll connect both the customer and the vendor for that lab together so that so here's my customer for that farm lab. I'm going to update. So now they're connected together. I know I can see how many samples that I've sent out to them through the customer, but you can connect them. The connection will show up on the agings. So if they owe something and you owe them, it will combine those in the agings so that it gives you a net of what is owed. Properties, remarks, you could leave remarks, you could take pictures, whatever you want, and then you can have attachments. So if you have contracts with them or anything like that, you can keep those in here. You can drill into what the balances are, excuse me, and you can look at like graphs form of it. All right, so that's the business partner. Now for some of the specifics that are to your business partner is going to be a state unique. So the state ID is going to be their license number. The state location, I'm going to try and get this renamed because it doesn't really tell you what it is. It's your lab ID. So if they're a lab, you need to have something in there for you to actually send it to the lab. Some of the other stuff down here are going to be some customer specific information. So their driver's license, date of birth. This stuff will come over from the point of sale. If you're using the point of sale, it will flow over directly in there. You can also, from your business partner, you can create different documents. You can create activities. So if you have a phone call and you want to record that phone call, you can create an activity and just track that. You can do reminders to call them. If you talk to them and say, I'll call you tomorrow, you can set up a follow-up and it will remind you to call them. So there's some different things you can do with the activities. All right, so that's the main things on the business partner. Let's look at a little bit of system information that we want to make sure. So posting periods. These are going to be all of your posting periods. And in this database, we have all of 2017, 2018, and 2019. You can see this one is locked These ones are listed as closing periods, and then these ones are unlocked. So depending on where you're at in your process, will depend on the status that you want it to have. So if I use the golden arrow, I can come in and I can look at my specific posting period. And here is your status. So after you've closed your year, you're going to lock out everything and nobody can do anything. If you're in the process of closing, you'll choose a closing period and it will block transactions from happening. You can have it unlocked except for cells. So if you're trying to, you want to make sure you're not receiving anything else, those types of things will be blocked from posting in this period. And then unlocked will just let you do whatever you need to. So those are just the different statuses that you can have that will determine if they can post in this time frame. All right, so we're going to look at the financials, kind of the chart of accounts, how those are set up. We do have two sets of chart of accounts. One of them is a segmented chart of account, and one of them is a simplified chart of accounts, and it just depends on how you're doing it. Let me show you what they look like, just so you can see what the difference is. So we've got the simplified chart of accounts here and the segmented here. You can see this one has dashes with different numbers in the end. This one doesn't have any dashes. It's just very simple. Why you might choose one over the other is just kind of what you want your chart of accounts to look like. If you want, so if you have maybe like a multiple retail stores or multiple farm locations, if you're using the segmented, you would have each one of those locations would have their own segment. So maybe your main office is O1, your one farm is O2, the next one's O3, your store is O4. So those are kind of how you can do it. And you can do them in different sections. So this one could be the state, this one could be the location, and then this one could be the department. However you want to separate it out, you can do that. For this one, you're going to use cost centers to do that. And so you would set up a cost center for each one of those locations, and then you would assign the different costs to those cost centers. So the advantage to having a simplified over a segmented is that is probably the expense section, because with this segmented, you're going to have a payables, like a payroll expense account for each one of those locations, for each combination of segments. So your chart of accounts is going to be just a little bit bigger. Very easy to run reports, though. You can always just run it on a specific segment, whatever you want, income statement. The difference for this simplified is that this is your chart of accounts. It's never going to grow any bigger. You'll just assign them to those different cost centers. And I'll kind of show you a little bit on both of those. Just so you understand that there's a little bit of different. You're using cost accounting, basically, if you're using the simplified chart of accounts. So if we look at this segmentation, so this database that I'm in has the segmented chart of accounts. So I have 8-digit natural account. I have a location that's 2 digits, the region that's 3 digits, and department. I can change these names to whatever I want. So whatever works for your organization, you can change them. And then if you double click into this area next to the number, it'll open up the fields where you can define what each one is. So O1 is the administration, O2 is field number 1, and you can add short names in there. So this is where you're going to assign those different segments, what they mean, how they show up. With a simplified, I've got one of those databases open. I'll just show you a quick look at what it looks like on the same process. So if I look at my segmentation, I only have a 5-digit natural account. However, if I look at my cost accounting, you can see I have cost centers and dimensions. So I can have multiple dimensions, and then I have a cost center for each one of them. So here I've got just a general cost center in here. It's just a different way of how your chart of accounts looks and what you're comfortable with. But those are what those two look like. So there will be just a little bit of adjustments depending on which one you're using. I can use my edit chart of accounts and come in here and make adjustments. So from here I can change the name. I can move them around. So if my accounts are not in order, I can come in and kind of move them to where I need them to be. You can also delete accounts from here. I just want to make sure. So we're going to go into, let me just show you one more thing with the chart of accounts. So you can get to the edit chart of accounts from the financials module, also as well as in the setup module. Excuse me. So for your chart of accounts, there's certain things you can do from this chart of accounts that you can't do from edit chart of accounts, and some things you can do from edit chart of accounts that you can't do from the regular chart of accounts. Edit chart of accounts is the only place you can delete an account. The chart of accounts, you can actually change the number of the account. So if you've done something wrong and you need to adjust it, you can actually come in and change that. You can also change the name in both of them. And if there's a balance, you can come in and look at that specific balance of what's in here and see all the activity in it. If you go to account details, there's things I can make accounts inactive, so I'm no longer going to use them. I can make them inactive. You can do an advanced one where you can make them active for a certain amount of time and inactive for another time. And then if you do things, if you in the future do set up budgets, you can always come in, and if I look at those, oh, we don't have it initialized. If it's initialized on these, you can actually say that you want it part of the budget, and it will include those. Here's those dimensions. So I've got a dimension. I can add a dimension here if you're using those cost accountings and see those details. So just depending on which one you're going to go with, it'll be just a little bit different as far as the setup. Your GL determinations, there's a couple different places that you're going to look at these. The GL determinations that are set here are just some of the default stuff. So if you do a sales order, it's going to go to, or an AR invoice, it'll go to your accounts receivable. If it's a foreign AR invoice, so depending on the currency, it would go to a foreign accounts receivable. Cash received is going to be like if you get the checks received is going to be if you get a check in from a customer and you use that as a payment towards an invoice, it will go into this check clearing account until you create a deposit. At that point, it will move it over into the cash account. Kind of same thing with this cash on hand. If you receive cash in, record it to an invoice as payment. It will go into the cash on hand until you've taken it to the bank and deposited it. Over under payments, cash discounts, you can set all that information up. Same thing for purchasing on the accounts payable information in here. Your general, this is going to be where your bank charges get assigned to, your retained earnings. So when you run a period closing, it will do the entry towards whatever retained earnings is in this. So your GL determinations are how you're setting your system up to hit the accounts that you want them to. This is the hardest thing about getting your system set up, making sure that your financials are looking right. And that's why we do this for very first training, so that you can look at these, see what they look like, and then we can, as there's the different testing going on, so as we have people in doing inventory transactions and production orders and sales orders and purchase orders and all those different things, you can come in and see, you can run your reports, you can see the accounts, and you can see what may be wrong. So for inventory, if you have all of your inventory going to finished goods, your balance sheet's going to look weird because you have clones and seeds and some of those different types of inventory. So this is why we kind of look at this first, make sure that you're looking at it, that you know where it comes from, so that if it looks like it's wrong, we can come in and figure out what account it should go to. So your inventory tab here is what defaults when you create an item group or a warehouse. So these are just going to be your basics, but every time I create an item group and an invoice or a warehouse, these are the accounts that'll pull over. And we'll look at those item groups and warehouses in just a little bit, and it will probably make just a little bit more sense. For resources, these are if you're going to set up labor time and machine time that you're going to add to your bills of material, so that those costs will roll up. The way it works is each line will have a different, will be assigned to whatever type of, if it's machine time, then it will go to a certain set of accounts, which would maybe your line 1 is your machine time, and maybe your line 2 is labor. So that's how you'd set up your resources. If you're doing resources, we'll probably need to help you through that. It's a little tricky to get it how you want it to. If you have data collect, you'll want to have those resources set up and added to your bills of materials, so that when you're using data collect, you can get real-time labor of how long it is taking them to do different things. So those are the main GL determinations, but there are other places to look, like the warehouse and the item group, and the bank information. So there's a couple different places to find those determinations. This is the main one that you'll look at first, and just it should be set up mostly correct, mostly what you want it to be. But there may be little tweaks depending on how you want your financials to come out looking like. Currencies, if you need additional currencies, these are what are defaulting with your database, but you can always add additional currencies. Projects, these will be when we're doing the projects for project management type stuff. Your 1099 information. So if you are setting up the different boxes, maybe you need to add a new one and set up different boxes for it. You can do some setup there. Taxes. I'm going to open up these two. So we've got our jurisdiction set up, which is this first one, where we're doing the different types of taxes. So what comes with the system is a special district, a state, a county, and a city. There may be another one that you need to add in there to segregate something else, but the second one down, the sales tax jurisdiction, is where you're going to actually go in and define what is in there. So on our special district, we have an accessories tax, a medical tax, and a recreational tax. And we have the tax accounts that they're going to hit when we have those added in there. So here's one of those other places where that GL determination may come into play. So if your taxes aren't hitting your correct account, it's probably because they're not set up correctly in here. And I could come in and I could just hit my little circle there, and I can choose what account I want it to go to. So the other thing that they're going to do in this setup is you're going to set your tax rates. So if my tax rate changes, and I want to look at the valid period for that. So in this accessories, if my rate changed, I'd put the effective date that it's changed. So maybe it changed on January 1st. And it's now at 6.5. So I can update that. What that does is any document before the first is going to be charged 6.25. Any documents after the first is going to be charged 6.5 if they're getting that accessories tax. So this is where you're going to just maintain those tax rates. The states, they're all set up in here. So you just find your state and you can just come in and change the rate, change the sales tax codes, whatever you need to do in there. And then for like your city, it defaults with these cities available. You could come in and you could remove them, but you can create your own cities and then the right rates and the accounts. So those are just those tax rates. Now, the next step is setting up tax codes. And these are going to be just the different tax codes that will go onto the document. So I've got my accessories tax. It's now at 6.5. I have my exempt, so that wouldn't charge any tax. My medical, recreational. And then I've got this one as an example to show you that you may have multiple that will roll up. So this one has a Utah state tax and then a city of NY. And you can see the state tax is 6, the NY is 2, so the total tax rate would be an 8%. So that's how you can charge different lines, different types of taxes on a single line in your different documents. Okay. The sales tax determination is how you can have the system automatically assign sales tax codes to the different documents. So you can charge them on the item type documents, service type documents, or both. And then you'll give it different reasons why. So if I say both, I can do sales or purchasing. So maybe we want to do a purchasing. And then you can give it conditions. So maybe I want it based off the business partner type. So let's say it's a vendor group because we're in purchasing. And then I'll choose what I want it to be. So if I want my labs to be at a specific, and I can do multiple, you can do multiple conditions that they have to meet. And then here, you're going to put what tax rate it is. So if I wanted to assign this Utah tax, that's what I would be charged on all of mine. Every time I do a purchase document for a vendor group that's labs, it'll automatically assign the Utah tax, and I don't have to go in and do it myself. So this is pretty helpful in getting that done automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. If you do have point of sale, you will have to do sales tax determinations, and it needs to be set up the same way as your POS so that the same tax is getting calculated in both systems. If all you do is exempt, you don't have taxes, you can always just set up a tax determination as just an exempt, and then it would automatically assign that as you're doing different documents. Okay, let's look at the banking setup. There's two setups here. So you've got your banks setup, which is an individual type of a bank. So we've got the Bank of America and our US Bank. On the house bank account, this is where you're going to create all of the individual accounts that you have at that bank. So you can see my Bank of America, I only have a savings account, but my US Bank, I have both a checking and a payroll in here. The big thing about this house bank account is that this is where you're going to assign your GL accounts. So if I look at this GL account that is assigned, it's the cash at bank checking, right? And this is my checking account. If I look at the savings one, you can see it's my savings account. So those are important so that the system knows what GL account is tied to each bank account. Other things you can do is you can set your next check number. And if you do have multiple banks that have different check layouts, we can assign a check layout template so that every time you print it out of this bank account, it would print on a specific type of a check. Every time you print it in this account, it would print on a different type of check. Do not use the lock checks from printing because you won't be able to print anything. So try not to mess with that one. Credit cards. Credit cards are both for customer payments as well as payments using your company credit card. You can see we've got the different accounts. So our customer ones are going to go to our credit card clearing, and our internal one is going to be in our purchasing clearing, so we can charge that out. So that is where you'd set both of those up, the accounts that you want them to go to. These will be used when you're doing payment means. So when I go in and I look at an invoice and I'm recording a payment, these would be available on the credit card tab. If I'm on a purchasing invoice, this would be available on the credit card tab on the purchase. You can set up payment methods, and you can see we've got a debit card. This is going to be, you'd need this to be set up to use the point of sale and have it come over if you're taking debit cards. And then payment methods. These are for using the payment wizard. And your payment wizard is basically a check run. So you could do a payment wizard that's going to print out checks at the end, or you can run a payment wizard that's going to send out a bank transfer file to the bank. So those are your two options for outgoing. The other thing you can do a payment method for is for an incoming bank transfer. So if you got a file from a bank, you could use the payment wizard and it would assign those incoming payments. I don't see that one a whole lot. I don't really see the outgoing transfer much, but the outgoing check is for sure one of those. You will need a payment method for each bank. So if I have an outgoing check for the US bank, I may also need, and I wanted to do it out of the, what was it? Bank of America, I think is the other one I have in there. I would also need to set up a payment method for outgoing checks for the Bank of America account. So you do need one for both if you're going to use the payment wizard. So that is the setup there, and this gets assigned to the business partners. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the chart of accounts. A couple things that I want to just point out. So we looked at the determinations. Any account that's in green on your chart of accounts is in a GL determination somewhere in the system. So we know this accounts receivable is on that one that we looked at. Sometimes you'll want to delete an account or do something and it won't let you because there's a GL determination. We just have to find out which one it's in. But just so you know, that's what the green means. So you cannot do, you can't delete those accounts because they're being used somewhere. The different drawers of where your accounts are. So you've got your main categories. There are the options here. So if I'm on my current asset, you can see this is a level 2 account and it's a title account. I can come to this cash and cash equivalents. This is my level 3 account and it's also a title account. But if I come down to this one, this is my level 4 and it's an active account. So all of your posting accounts, anything that's going to get a journal entry is going to be at a level 4 or higher. So you can add level 5 like if you wanted to have something split up, you could change this to a title account and add level 5 accounts that are posting accounts under it. You can actually go up to a level 10. The largest I've seen is 5. But, so I could change this and only look at, you can change this when you're doing like income statement, balance sheet, that type of thing. I can change it to look at only level 1. For my balance sheet, that's just going to have my assets, liabilities, and equity. If I changed it to be a level 2, then it's going to have just a little bit more detail. So I'd have the current assets, fixed assets, and long-term assets. That's all it would be on there. So there's some different ways you can kind of look at those just based on the level that they're in. Oh, one thing, and I'm hoping this will be fixed. We're going to get a new patch level here in the next couple months. When they did the 9.3, you can see they didn't format these top 2 buttons the same as these. They basically added these 2 for European companies, was asking for another 2 other drawers in there. So it does look a little bit funny, but it works the same as the drawers do. Okay. So let me just make sure. Okay, so let's look at the other side of the determinations on your inventory. So as I said, that those GL determinations on that inventory tab will automatically feed into your item groups and your warehouses. And this is what I mean. So if I have my warehouse, I can see these accounts. So if I created a new warehouse, I wanted to add a new one, these are the accounts that are in that GL determination for the inventory tab. So if I look at that, here's my inventory tab, and you can see it will add the same. There's my inventory and my inventory. So it does just pull over those. Now, as far as when you're looking at these are the harder one to figure out. We were having the GL determination default be by warehouse because of the way that we have our warehouses set up. What we found is that it's probably going to be better to have them set by item group, because when you get to revenue, most people want to see revenue for flour versus revenue for concentrates, those types of differences, and you can't do that through a warehouse. So we do item groups. So a couple things. Let's look at the item groups. Find, okay. All right. So the item groups that come with the add-on are going to be these ones. Now, when you are in testing, I would not delete any of these. There's kind of a reason why they're flowing through these. So until we've got your thing figured out, I would leave all of them. The one that you're probably going to need to add more of is going to be the finished goods. And this is how you would set those different revenues for the different types of items. When you are doing one, you're going to duplicate it. So if it's a finished good type, you're going to duplicate your finished goods because we need to make sure we maintain the settings that are associated with this. So if I would change it to like a finished good concentrate, right? For this, now I'm going to look at these accounts and my revenue, I'm going to want to change to, I don't think I have any of those revenue accounts set up in this one, but I could change it to my revenue that was for concentrates. My inventory is going to be my finished goods still. My COGS, I would also change that to a concentrate COGS. So these will help you when you do a sales order and your inventory gets sold that is assigned to this item group. it will hit this set of accounts. So it's going to be in this inventory. It's going to hit this cells. It's going to, if there's variances, it's going to hit these variance accounts. And there's a lot to this, but we do have in our standard chart of accounts that we have right now, these are all set for you. So it's already, but there will be some that you're going to need to add and make some changes to. Warehouse, I'll show you the list that comes. So we have a general warehouse, which is just a lot of people use it for like their dirt, pots, anything that's not cannabis. A lot of times they'll use the general warehouse. You can use that. There may be a reason, like if you're on a bigger scale, you may need to have it in more of a warehouse that's specific to a site. But that's, you can use it for that. We do have a samples warehouse, and like I said before, with the labs, you have to take a sample out, and so when you take a sample of the item, it's going to go into the samples warehouse. Then you need to send that sample to your lab, which will take it out of the samples warehouse. So this gives you a place to make sure that your samples that you've taken have actually been sent properly to the different labs. We have our seed bank, clone bank, workroom, bedroom, and there's only one of each of these that gets installed, but you can have as many as you need. But this helps it go through the process of the workroom is basically your nursery area. Then it'll go to veg, flower. When it gets harvested, it'll hit the harvest room. Then you'll dry it, cure it, process it. And you can, again, a lot of times we'll have people that have edibles and they'll do kitchens and all kinds of different processing. But again, you're going to do a duplicate. Whatever it's closest to, you're going to duplicate to make sure that those user-defined fields stay the same. And then you would just make adjustments to whatever accounts. You can see that this particular warehouse does have bins enabled. So we've got our bins enabled here, and we've got our bins. So I can look at my bins. Here's my bins. I've got quantity in those, and the setup. So that's kind of some bin. That's why this one looks a little bit different. If I come to some of my others, like this one doesn't have bins. So it can be a combination. I would not recommend going more than one bin deep, 2 at the very most. The more bins you have, the more complicated it gets, and you just need to make sure that the people that are doing those and working with the bins has the ability to handle the different things that comes with doing bins. All right, so we've got these setups. We've got the inventory. This is just how your inventory is going to be set up as these. So this will be where you're going to want to look at. So clone inventory is not going to go to the same place as like your finished goods are going to go. So there's the setup of getting those in, and let me show you where that takes effect. So let me find a plant. Okay, so I've got my plant here, and it is in the item group of cannabis plant. Now I've got a warehouse. These are all the warehouses that we have. If I have set GL accounts by warehouse, it will use the accounts that are on this warehouse. So if this item, if this plant moved to a flower room, and my flower room had different GL accounts, it would change the GL accounts when it was moved from one warehouse to the other. So if it's set by warehouse, it depends on which warehouse it's in. It'll go to those accounts. Now, when you might want to use warehouse would be if you have the point of sale and you have multiple retail locations, each retail location is going to be its own warehouse. And those items will need to be marked as being set by warehouse so that you have a correct inventory report that's showing how much is in this warehouse, how much is at this retail location versus how much is at this retail location. That being said, when you have it set up that way, it's going to be, your reports that are going to come out are not going to be revenue by flour, revenue by concentrate. It's going to come out as revenue by a location. So you'd be able to see how much revenue was coming out of a store in SAP. Now there's other reports in the point of sale that would be able to help you identify how much flour, how much concentrate, that type of a thing. But by warehouse, it's just whatever warehouse it's in. Now, if I have this set by item group, it's going to go off of this chart of accounts. So it doesn't matter what warehouse it's in. It can move from here to here to here. It doesn't matter. It's always going to go to these accounts. So that's the difference. And this is kind of a hard one to wrap your brain around. But as we get through the trainings, we just kind of keep looking at this. We'll look at the entries that are made, and you can see where things may be going wrong. But just remember, item group is going to go whatever's on here. If it's set by warehouse, it just depends on what warehouse it's in. So that's kind of the big one, is just your GL accounts and chart of accounts, the GL determinations. So that's the main thing that we're covering today. The only other thing I wanted to touch on is the human resources, because you might want to start setting up some employees. If you have data collect, you will need to have an employee set up for each employee that's going to be using data collect. This employee number is what assigns it back and forth into data collect. So they have to be an employee for that reason. Now, if you're going to have a driver assigned to a specific route, so if you're going to use the route management, you'll need to have them set up as an employee, and the role will be, I probably have a driver in here. So the role and the membership needs to be driver. And that will allow them for you to be able to assign a route to that driver. Other things that you'll need for driver is start date, birthday, and I think seems like there was driver license, but I can't remember exactly if there's something else. I know those two need to be in there, but that is to, send the information for compliance reasons of who's driving your stuff. So, with the employee master, I would for sure decide who's using data collect, make sure they're all set up so that when you do the data collect training and some of that setup, that it's pretty easy to use your system and walk through that. Okay, that is all I have planned for today. There's a lot to it. If you have questions that are specific, we can get out. If you have any questions right now, go ahead and put them in the chat or in the questions box, and I can answer them for you. So a couple things. You're going to get this recorded training is going to be added into your shared folder, along with any of the SOPs that we have associated with this section. You're probably going to get, you'll get all of the SOPs basically for finance. So journal entries, those types of things that we will talk about in the Financial 2 training. But that should be there. We can also set up some Q&A sessions this week before you start the trainings next week, or we could set one up for Monday, or wait until all the trainings. But we do some one-on-one to make sure that we have your specific system set up and ready to go. So I'm not seeing any questions in here. So I'll go ahead and just close this meeting. Tomorrow's going to be on the inventory. It'll get into a lot more detail on getting template items set up and that type of a thing. Okay, so I got a couple questions coming in. Tax rates, are the tax rates importable? No, not really. Not for standard SAP, I should say. If you're in a company that has, well, I know California has very difficult taxes, and currently, like for non-cannabis companies, we use a lot of companies will use Avalara, which we have an integration with. They won't touch cannabis yet. So there are some different things that we have set up. I know we do have some things already kind of in place for some of the California taxes that are a little bit different than everywhere else. But we'll just work through those with you. So can the state be changed for tax purposes? Yes. A tax rate is just a tax rate, and you can put a determination that everything goes to a specific tax rate. The system, unless you say that it's in the determinations, unless you say that it's this tax rate, if it's this a specific zip code, the system doesn't really care which tax rate it's going. It'll just do whatever you want it to go to. All right. See if anything else is popping up. Okay, so what if the associate using data collect is not an employee? You're an independent contractor type of relationship. The only thing that this HR is doing for data collect is just creating a link so that when they sign in, because they'll have a login for data collect, and then they'll have the employee information assigned to them in data collect by whoever's in charge of that. So when they sign in, they'll only see what's assigned to their employee ID. So it's really just setting up a link for those for the person that's going to be using data collect. You can track in here that they're an independent contractor just for your own purposes, but as far as data collect, it's just whatever you're going to add in there. Okay. All right, let's see. Do you recommend a certain credit card processing service? That one is kind of, it depends. If you're talking about, well, we do have some integrations with a couple different processors. I haven't found one, at least that I know of, that will process any for cannabis. So it's something that we'd have to look into to see. But there are some that we can do an integration. If it's on point of sale, that will be a little bit different process because it'll go through the point of sale and whatever terminals that you have at the point of sale to send those through. Okay, so you'll get the recording as soon as, so when we get done, I'll have to convert it over, and then it will just be put into your shared folder on the G drive. So everybody will get it under their recorded trainings folder. This will just be put in there, and then I'll add another folder that will be SOPs, and the SOPs will be added in that folder. So it's all on your specific shared folders. Okay, any other questions? All right. Okay, well, I'll get this video converting over, and then I'll make sure that it's in your shared folder for you to review. And let me know if any questions come up. Again, tomorrow is the inventory one. It is starting an hour earlier just due to some constraints on our webinar that we have. So it'll be at 9 Mountain Time, and it will go over just all the inventory items. We'll talk a lot about how to do the templates and that type of thing. So let me know if anything comes up. Otherwise, we'll just have you join the trainings tomorrow. Thank you.